Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Q&A session. It'll be rather interesting for some reason. Hey Samantha, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And so it actually just started storming out of all the things that could happen. Lightning, storming, everything else outside. Just as I turned on the show. But we definitely need it, that's for sure. We have a drought to no end here. So, okay, yeah, Michelle and Samantha, thank you both for coming on. Appreciate it. Give it a second here to a couple people come on, and then we'll begin our journey through the Q&A. See how well this works itself out, to say the least. So I hope everyone's doing well. On Sunday afternoon, at least it's a little bit of cool weather, depending on where you're at. And so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I know the rain's hitting rather hard on the window over here, so hopefully it's not too much background noise as far as that goes, but just let me know if there is. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started and then see where all of this goes on that end. So this is a little different compared to what I'm used to with having a laid out plan and slides and everything. So it's a little bit of a unique experience for me as well, but we'll go ahead and run with this and see how well it works. And I figure I'd start with one question. I guess a couple. I'll kind of pop some up in my head that I was asked here recently. Of course, Michelle knows of what I'm talking about. Very interesting, good questions, to say the least, in regards to Christianity, both the Old and New Testament. But I guess we'll go ahead and start with the ideas embedded within New Ageism. And hopefully, again, just comment if you can actually hear me speak somewhat clearly, because it's raining pretty hard outside, so as well as lightning. But as long as it's not too bad, then we're good. And take a minute here to really. Okay, good, great, thank you. So the ideas embedded within New Ageism is, we'll start with. Okay, good. That's great to know. Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate that. That's good. I'm very surprised. But the ideas embedded within New Ageism, with that of an impersonal force that governs the universe, or I'd say rather is the universe itself, which actually stem back to that of the time of Buddha, the Buddhist philosophy. And one of the guys that was speaking up was presenting this case of there being an impersonal force and the universe itself being God, rather than God being this personal deity that is found within Christianity, the Old and New Testament. And the issues that I saw with the idea of an impersonal entity, well, first off, as I was explaining to him, is the fact that they believe that the universe is eternal, that the universe is God itself. The problem with that is we know that the universe, scientifically speaking, is not eternal. It has the beginning and it has the end. And we know that. That's not just found within Christianity. That's found within the scientific discovery, starting with Hubble and onward. We have found that the universe had a beginning point called the singularity, which initiated the Big Bang, creation of the universe, expanded, and we're here now with the universe is about 13.7 billion years old, and that it will continue to expand. And recent estimations so far, mathematically speaking, have found that dark energy, one thing, is responsible for the expansion of the universe, and that the universe has been accelerating its expansion due to dark energy, and that dark energy will eventually slow down like a balloon, slow down its expansion, and then begin to pull itself back in back towards a singularity. They estimated somewhere around anywhere from 60 million to 120 million, I think, somewhere in that time frame, that the universe could collapse upon itself and go back to a state of singularity. And Roger Penrose, a famous physicist, has promoted the ideas that perhaps what happens is that the universe fluctuates like that, goes back to initial state of singularity, emerges back out and keeps fluctuating like that, creating a new universe each time. Which I guess at that point you could speculate perhaps the universe is eternal if it has this fluctuating capacity, because the universe truly is ended in and of itself, since it does go back to the essence of its reality is compacted within the singularity. So therefore, perhaps it could be made eternal. But even then, there is this beginning and end period for those that dwell within the universe. And the Bible itself even explains this, that there was a beginning in the account of Genesis, of course, but even within the book of Peter and Revelation speaks of the universe collapsing upon itself in the future, burning everything up, and then exploding into a new universe. So that actually supports the biblical narrative more than it does the Buddhist philosophy or the New Age philosophy as well, because that's where they derive it from. Some don't even know that, surprisingly enough, but that's where they get it from. And so the universe isn't necessarily eternal. And as I like to tell people as well, whoever gave that information to Peter and John when he wrote the book of Revelation about the idea of a universe collapsing upon itself and then reemerging into a new universe, has knowledge that exists outside the space-time universe, which perhaps is a part of a higher dimensional realm acting upon our own, which some physicists have predicted that perhaps that's what dark matter is itself, which makes up, I believe makes up around 86% of our universe. And then I think only about 4 or 5% is visible matter. 86%, I believe, is dark matter, and then the remainder is dark energy. And what's interesting is dark matter, they don't know what it is. They propose perhaps it's a higher dimensional realm acting on our own that shapes our universe. Dark matter is actually what holds the universe together, essentially, holds the galaxies in order. If it wasn't for dark matter, the galaxies would fling apart, because gravity is not a strong enough force to hold everything together as such. So interesting to take note there that perhaps it may be a higher dimensional realm, and you could say the unseen realm, the heavenly realm, however you want to word it, acting upon our own, just as described in the Bible. So some more evidence supporting the case for Christianity. But continuing on with the idea of an impersonal force, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm trying to think real quick. The Islamic idea of God is essentially akin to that. And so, understand that for a minute. Yeah, hang on. Let me clarify this, and then I'll jump on to that. We'll kind of discuss that. I wanted to use this just as get the ball rolling, and then we can start having people chime in, start asking questions. And you can ask questions. Anyone and everyone can ask questions, whatever they feel like asking at this point. And I'll do my best to answer. Whether or not I can answer it, I don't know, but we'll find out. But the idea of an impersonal force, a divine creator being an impersonal force, doesn't make any sense due to the fact that we are personal creatures. Even the universe itself, as I did a debate video about 3 years ago with a guy named Morg or something like that. I think his name was Morg. Maybe it was something like that. And something weird. He had a bunch of followers, which surprised me, but he's a very strange guy. But he was claiming that he had 100% proof, logical proof that God wasn't real, that there was no such thing as God, and that really unconscious mathematical formulas is what created this universe. But logically speaking, that makes absolutely no sense. And the reason for that is because something that's unconscious, first off, where did those mathematical formulations come from to begin with? But second off is the fact that something unconscious, to create a universe that appears to be conscious on the subatomic level, this universe does not exist without a conscious observer observing it. That's what we have learned through the studies on quantum physics. The fact that particles remain a wave, which is potentiality, and do not become actuality until an observer, a conscious observer, observes it and makes it into its particle state, into true reality. And so reality doesn't even manifest itself unless there's a conscious observer. And there's this engagement, dialogue, I would say, interaction between the observer and the potential state of the universe, of reality, which means that reality needs its personal in and of itself, that it needs that interaction from a conscious observer to activate it into existence and manifest itself. And with that being said, it has a personal aspect to it. There's this dialogue in between us and reality that allows it to manifest itself. And if it's not for that, then the universe remains in the potential state and never becomes reality. And so logically following, trying to make sense of an unconscious mathematical formula or even an impersonal force, a divine force, creating a conscious personal universe for conscious personal entities to inhabit, to activate it into existence, does not make any sense. You would imagine that a higher level of consciousness that has higher levels of empathy and a sense of connection and dialogue would create a personal universe and personal creatures, conscious creatures, to be able to inhabit it, for all this to work and activate itself. But logically, it'd be illogical to think that unconscious impersonal forces would be creating a conscious universe, conscious personal universe for conscious personal beings who inhabit and activate it into existence. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So it makes more sense, again, with the higher consciousness, which is exactly what the Bible describes about God himself, the God of the Bible. And again, as I was saying, I kind of got off track there for a second. It's the God of Islam, Allah, is essentially sort of akin to that. You can't really have a personal relationship with him. He's impersonal because he's too holy and too distant for us to connect with. And so that doesn't make any sense either within that context, that an impersonal higher conscious being would sit there and create conscious personal beings, conscious personal universe to interact with one another, to dialogue with each other in order for reality to manifest itself and for the conscious being to engage with that reality. And so it just doesn't make any sense. So as far as I can tell, of all the religions, Christianity points towards, at least scientifically speaking, the most accurate logically and scientifically in that realm. So, okay, so we were talking, oh, hey, Ashley, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And so, Samantha, okay, you were asking, can you talk about your understanding of the firmament at some point? Hey, Mason, thanks for tuning in. Miss you as well. Hope all is well on your end. That's for sure. Definitely been a while. It's definitely, yeah, it's been quite some time. So what do you mean as far as the firmament, Samantha? I mean, kind of elaborate on that just a little bit to understand kind of where I'm going with that. The firmament, as far as the atmosphere of the Earth itself, or you're speaking of space itself? And are you speaking from a flat Earth perspective? That kind of where you're going. Oh, does space above exist? Well, I mean, yeah, space above exists. Space surrounding us exists. I don't subscribe to the flat Earth, you know, theory as far as that goes, because there's not very much evidence at all to support that. I mean, everything in the universe we see outside of the Earth is round. Everything is, you know, orbits the sun. We can see all that. You can see that just by simply looking up in the night sky. You can see that looking through a telescope, even a cheap one. You can see everything has a, you know, a circular circumference there. And so I haven't seen any evidence to really support. Even in the Bible itself, people don't realize that oftentimes whenever it talks about the earth being held up by the pillars and things of that nature, it's more metaphorical metaphorically speaking. It's written like that because, well, that's found in the book of Psalms, and that's if I'm not mistaken, maybe the book of Job, but it's more of a poetry type form of writing, and so they're using metaphor to explain things that they don't quite understand. And what's interesting is the Earth essentially is fixed within its position, orbiting the sun, and so it has stability to it, of course. On the devil, curious on the devil and the evil behind the agenda. And no, I don't believe there's any water above us. No. The separation of water, and it's interesting because Gerald, and I'm going to pronounce his name incorrect probably, and I actually have his book in the link. I have a few books in the description, some links there on Amazon. If you guys want to check that out, you can. Sorry, drinking these energy drinks, carbonation. Do apologize. He explains the separation of the water of the firmament through more of the Big Bang Theory perspective. And I can't remember exactly. I'm trying to think right quick of how he explained that. There's a lot of stuff he wrote, and he went through 13.7 billion years of evolutionary history and conjoined that with Genesis 1. And it's really fascinating work, and it's amazing the parallel between the two. They're very akin, and people don't realize that because we look at things too literal oftentimes. And that, I said in previous show that's looking at things more through the left hemisphere of our brains. That's looking at things and taking things out of context, looking at things literally rather than looking at what may be hidden behind what's being said and trying to understand it and graft in new information from the outside into those sequence of events that are written down to better understand them. But trying to see real quick. So, and I can't remember exactly how he described the water. He was explaining it just after the initial Big Bang. It had nothing to do with the Earth itself, but rather the separation between. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. That's a tough one because I don't have the book or anything with me. Yeah, you had to read it. I can't remember exactly how he does that. And yeah, exactly. Thanks, Joe, for pointing that out on YouTube. Exactly. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. It's been a while since we last spoke and everything. And yeah, the word yom in Hebrew, they try to oftentimes, well, it just means 24-hour day. It's used as 20. It's like, well, no, even again, going back to what I said about Psalms, the book of Psalms, is the idea that even Genesis 1 has a poetic type element to it. And so a lot of it, some of it is metaphor, but it's very mysterious. That whole, really the first 3 or 4 chapters that are written in Genesis are layered on top of each other. And my gosh, we don't know exactly how deep that rabbit hole goes within that. And I've been analyzing it for years, trying to better understand that text, because it's very fascinating once you begin to break it down and learn more about evolution and correlate those two together. It's fascinating. And Gerald Schroeder does a wonderful, in the Science of God book, he does a wonderful job at laying that out, exactly how the sequence of events go in correlation with the days. And again, if you're going to take the text of Genesis 1 literally, then, what is it, day 3 or 4, the sun is supposedly created. And so there is no such thing as a 24-hour day prior to those 3 days. So what days are they even talking about exactly? And so the days there are represented more in the heavenly realm perspective, which could be millions and billions of years within our universe itself. And so, but it's fascinating when you really begin to research that in. Lisa, thank you for joining. Alan, I really appreciate you guys coming on. Okay, so going back to Michelle's, I believe Michelle or Samantha, one of you two, I know I've asked this question about. Okay, Michelle, staying on religion, but I'm curious on the devil, the evil behind the agenda. Well, Lucifer supposedly is supposed to be the head angel that fell from heaven, and the third of the angels fell with him, and so he's the leader behind the agenda that we're currently witnessing. Yes. Now, getting in depth on all that, I'm not exactly sure how all of that ties in necessarily, but supposedly he's supposed to be the leader of that. He was almost like a mirror image of God to a certain extent when he was in heaven. So it says, I feel we can see him the most because this is his realm. Yes, exactly. Yes. To a certain extent, exactly. We can see more of that than we can the heavenly realm, which is the realm of God. See the actions, things are coming. Push the Bible into our side that we know that control. Again, as far as the deliberate push of the Bible into our society, but they don't control it. That's why I was explaining to that guy before. He was trying to tell me that the Jews somehow used Christianity to manipulate the masses, but I don't see any evidence of that at all. The Jews were against Christianity. They exiled Christians, and that's how I haven't really understood false Jews in Revelation 3:9. That's what the enemy Jews. Which came from Eastern. It's like prohibiting alcohol. What exactly is like prohibiting alcohol? Are you meaning the push of the Bible, like prohibit? Oh, the push. So you're saying the push of taking away the Bible is what you're saying. It says push of the Bible, pushing away of the Bible in our society. Is that what you mean, Michelle? I'm trying to read Ashley's. You'll hear that. I agree with him. Just got mad when they made the golden calf. Nothing mixed in and brought their falsehood. The interesting thing, what that guy was pointing out. They're keeping it alive. Okay, hang on. I'm trying to put all this together between you guys. Yeah, but like I said, as far as them using the Bible to somehow control, again, where I can see the control really manifesting itself is not even through the Bible itself. And again, he was saying that exactly. He was trying to say that wants us to know the narrative. And like I said, the only form of control that Christianity has really manifested was after the Roman Empire got a hold of Christianity, and began to implement pagan ideas within it. And it became much more dogmatic at that particular point in time. But Christ never really promoted that idea. He was even against the Jews, the Pharisees, who were extraordinarily dogmatic within Judaism. And so, if you think we have no choice to save ourselves. Yeah, well, that's the thing he was talking about. Yeah, it's a lie, and that we're going to have to save ourselves and all this and that. Poverty. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people that are not true, authentic people. And the interesting thing, going back to what he was talking about with the idea of the Jews taking over the world, the thing I had to point out to him that doesn't really make sense with all that is the fact that whenever they came out of Exodus, you keep fixating on the ideas of Jews, but it was the nation of Israel, which the nation of Israel was a mixed multitude coming out of Egypt. And so and anyone and everyone could come into Israel and become a citizen simply by going ahead and abiding by the laws of God and worshiping Yahweh, the one true God. So it really wasn't a matter of ethnicity. It was a matter of the heart of the individual serving the one true God. And so that's where I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they, and the verses he used from the Old Testament all related to the nation of Israel. It didn't relate to anything of the Hebrews or the Jews, and that's where it was very strongly. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Israel was a mixed multitude. It was a nation that worshiped, served God. It wasn't necessarily an ethnic group. It was a mixed multitude. So that doesn't really, And no, that's not necessarily true. Again, Revelations, so, okay. Let me backtrack this because I was talking to this guy about this as well. Going back to the dogmatization of Christianity. This is where the problem really lies at, is that as the Christian church has become more dogmatized, we have stripped a lot of the spiritual elements within that's embedded within the text. Most people have no idea what the text is actually teaching oftentimes. Whenever I talk about the ideas of transformation, for instance, most people think, well, that's just, I gave my life to Christ and now I'm a better person and I'm transformed. I'm like, that's not what the text talks about at all. It isn't. And, it'd be nice if that were the truth, but that's something that's, and I got hair sticking up back here, a little ADD going on for a second. And, that's not, that's something that the Christian church, I would say, more or less has promoted. You come to Christ, you're somewhat transformed from the experience, from the initial experience, but it doesn't end. That's what people don't get. Paul says that, it's not that he has become perfected, which means he has not matured fully within Christ, but he continues to strive to do so. And it's a lifelong process. It's really, if you think about it, I try to explain this to people and people don't like this, but this extends all the way to heaven. You're never going to be perfect. There's only one that's perfect, and that's Christ. That's God himself. You'll never be perfect. So there's always learning. There's always growing. There's always serving that's going to be done. Even within the new universe, it says that we will be serving the Lord. What that means exactly, I don't know. It doesn't specify. But you have to have, in order to be human, you have to have something that drives you, something that keeps you going, and that gives you purpose and meaning. And so Christ taught about the ideas of transformation. I said it before, that you look at the transfiguration of Christ, which is illumination, process of illumination. Moses essentially experienced the same thing on Mount Sinai the second time, coming down completely illuminated and transfigured, his face disfigured, and people were afraid of him. He had to wear a veil. And so from being in the presence of God, the same word that is used for transfigured with Christ is the same exact word that Greek word that Paul uses, metamorphoso. I believe I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's the same exact word that's used within the gospel to describe the transfiguration of Christ. The word transfiguration, transfigured, is the same word for transformed in the Christian life mentioned by Paul. So if you actually took that as what was used there and correlate those, we're supposed to ascend to new levels in our life. We're supposed to literally be transformed, being able to perform miracles and all kinds of different things that we don't we no longer really do in the Christian church anymore. Christian church is more predicated upon having fog machines and lights and wonderful music and attract the masses, but no one's truly growing, as far as I can tell. And everyone acts like, and the problem too is most people act like children in church now. And I'm not trying to be derogatory. I'm not trying to bash or do anything. This is just what I observed, and this is what other people have observed as well. Especially among my generation and younger generation, they act like children, and everybody needs to be nice all the time. That's not what it says, and that's what a lot of people take out of context as well within Scripture. Oh, you got to turn the cheek. That's for a specific situation, but that's not for all situations. We're called to protect. We're called to be strong. We're called to be courageous. We're called to stand against the opposition, to stand, to watch, to pay attention to what's going on, because the opposition is coming for us. The evil one roams around like a roaring lion in any and all forms. And so we have to be strong and ready, especially as far as males, men go, I would say. You need to be strong, you need to be ready. And we have for forever until the emergence of civilization. And, about 6,000 years ago and onward, we just continuously have gotten weaker and smaller and failer. And we have believed the lie of modernization of society, the delusion that is delusion and illusion set around us, that you just go work your job, you get fat, you're going to have health problems, and you're going to retire one day, but you're not going to really enjoy retirement because, you're going to spend all your money on medical bills and, live a few years and then you'll die. And that's just the way life is. And, there is no such thing as really transforming. It's just about being a good person, essentially. And it's like, that's not what the Bible says at all. I mean, even the idea of that what that is a process of conservation. And it's the exact same thought process of the man within the story of the talents, and the man that had the one talent, and he took that talent, hid it in the sand. I'm just going to play it safe today. I'm going to stick it in the sand. I'm not going to try anything because, I don't want to upset God. I don't want to end up sinning. I don't want to do anything, and make anyone mad. I'll just play it easy. And you see how well that works out. It's like we're supposed to take risk, and we're supposed to constantly see how far we can go of tapping into the potential that God has given us. And that ultimately, the byproduct of that is ultimately giving glory to God. It gives glory to God. It helps us, and it helps those around us in society. No one wants to do that anymore. And no one reads into that. No one reads into the fact that Christ said, after he was transfigured, immediately after that, they came down the mountain, and his disciples were trying to cast out a demon and they couldn't. And he cast out the demon, and then they asked, well, how do you do this? And he said, well, it's because you have little faith. And if you just had the faith of a mustard seed, you could say this mountain moved from here to there. The church has taken that text, what he has said, and said, well, that's just, that's just an analogy he's using. It's not a literal mountain. It's like he just got done descending from the mountain. So he's more than likely pointing towards the mountain, saying, if you could move this. So a form of telekinesis. And you can argue with me on that. That's for sure. It's probably can be argumented. But at the end of the day, spiritually speaking, and he said, we're supposed to be doing impossible things that are only possible with God. And, he said, you say this mountain moved from here to there, moving physical mountains with your mind, with consciousness. And he said, this is only can go out through prayer and fasting, which is essentially meditation and fasting, quieting. Because back then, what people don't realize is now the whole prayer deal of closing our eyes and folding our hands, that's actually more, that stems back through the formation and dogmatization of Christianity within the Roman Church, Roman Empire, and later on as well. Prayer in those times, Jews meditated. That's what prayer was, essentially. And of course, they read the prayers as well in the books, but oftentimes they steeled themselves. And you see that hints of that throughout even the Old Testament as well, with David talking about lying on his bed, quieting himself and trying to speak with the Lord. Abraham was, whenever the three men, which represented essentially that of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit came to him, he was meditating under the palm trees during the day. Same thing with Isaac. Whenever his wife came over the hill, he was meditating with his eyes closed and opened up his eyes and saw Rebecca, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, I think. Anyway, so there's a lot more to it. There's seriously a lot more to the text we have to read into, but you got to get into the original language. And, and of course, not everybody can do that, and that's understandable. But the problem I have is with a lot of the teachers. If you're a teacher, you should be delving deep into this, not just deep into the word and into the original language, but even outside of that to look at empirical data that supports the Bible, supports what it says. Like we know that meditation and fasting rewire the brain and create new brain cells within your brain. I mean, those are just little variations of the truth of what Christ was saying. It's that it literally can actually transform you within your mind. And what happens when you do that, not only does it transform your brain, but it affects the cells within your body that activate new genes, produce new proteins throughout your body that literally change your body as well at the same time. And so, I mean, if everybody actually took the time to exercise and to engage with the word on a deep level and to then implement these ideas of meditation and fasting within their life. And trust me, I'm not saying that, I'm perfect, I'm transformed. Not at all, by no means. I have so much work, it's ridiculous. But I'm doing my best to try to integrate those teaching in as much as I can. And so, okay, I know I spoke a whole bunch. I'll feel bad because there's people that's been commenting over. Joe's said some things, and oh man. Okay, so let me try to. This is a very interesting process. So Luciferians have always infiltrated and subverted whatever can threaten them. Not the MO. It's not the Jews or the Jews. It's exactly, absolutely, exactly, Joe. I love that. Yeah, it's the Luciferians. It's Lucifer's minions they're doing. It's not an ethnic group of people. I mean, there's a variation. It's a mixed multitude within the World Economic Forum, the UN, all those kind of places that you see. It's not just the Jews trying to take over the world. That's where I'm like, show me the evidence for that, and I haven't seen it. And so, for me, I'm kind of a nice guy, and being derogatory towards a Pacific ethnic group, I'm just like, I told him, I'd rather not really talk about that, to be honest. So I love the wisdom from mistakes. Exactly. The mistakes that we make, and that's experimentation. I'll actually get to that here in a second, because it is interesting. My wife and I are actually talking about it last night, the drive home. And, but I've spoke about it plenty before, the ideas of transformation through mistakes to what constitutes sin. We had a show not too long ago about what constitutes sin. What is that exactly? Because I really took a lot of time to think about what constitutes actual sin. What is that? It's missing the way. It's missing the mark, but it's a deviation from the way. And since we are learning, adaptable creatures, we're going to deviate. That's the idea of sinful nature embedded within us, and the reason for that is because we're not all knowing and we're not all powerful, and so we have to experiment through, I would say, our gut feelings, through intuition, which is also housed in the right hemisphere. I should go into that as well, what Christ had taught about, which correlates with our data on understanding hemisphere differences and integrating knowledge into our brain, which is very fascinating. What he spoke about being childlike, and that also goes along with what I was talking about earlier with the immaturity found within much of the church today. That's not what he was talking about. So you can be like a child or remain like a child. Even Paul capped into that whenever he was talking about how there's so many that are on the milk of the word and they need to be on the meat, and that's a form of maturity. And you mature and you grow and you delve deeper into what the word is, because the word itself has multiple different levels of analysis. And so at a fundamental level, as Christ said, you can teach this to babes, and it's true. You can teach this stuff to my kids, all kinds of things, but there's multiple different levels of analysis. And I don't know how many times I've heard Christians and pastors and stuff, teach and say things like, oh yeah, no, it's real simple. The word's simple. It's a given. It's like, no, it's actually not. It's very complex. To simplify the word the quote unquote living word that was spoken by God into a simplistic form as such and say it's just simple. It's like, man, it's kind of derogatory towards God for one, and the people that wrote it as well. It's like, it's not that simple. Trust me, it's very complex. There's multiple different levels of meaning, and you have to delve into, as I said before, not only the original language, as well as looking at various parts. So the whole of the context, not only the little parts, the little verses and things. The guy, he sent me over some verses dealing with the Old Testament. He thought it dealt with rape, and I was like, no, it doesn't actually. And I also recommended him a good book, and I have the book actually in my description as well. You can check that out by Paul Copan, Is God a Moral Monster? I actually had him on the show. What was that? A year and a half ago now, I think. I think it was a year and a half ago. Yeah, it was last year, April. I had him on my show for an interview, professor, and he did a wonderful job. The book's great. I read it a couple of times because it was so informative, dealing with very difficult passages within the Old Testament, trying to understand the Old Testament within its context. And the verse he pulled out from Deuteronomy 22, the end part of Deuteronomy, I forgot exactly, 28, verse 28 or something of that nature. And I was like, no, that wasn't dealing. It's actually dealing with consensual relationship between a man and a virgin. And the previous verses before that was actually dealing with the rape deal, and the man would be murdered. And you have to, you can't just pull verses out and go, oh, see, look, it's wrong. It's like, no, look at the whole of the context, then look at the whole of the context itself, the Bible itself, and then you can go ahead and graft in some information from the outside sources, maybe various philosophies, scientific endeavors, look at all those different information. It's very complex, and so you gotta look at all of it in order to make a proper conclusion, rather than jumping to conclusions and going, see, it's just wicked, it's propaganda, it's ridiculous, they're trying to manipulate us. It's like, well, no, not exactly. You got to really look at it. Okay, sorry, I rambled on again. But so, my favorite thoughts on anyone I heard of or something. Oh, as far as teaching of the Bible, and I actually haven't listened to any pastors or anything of that sort in a very long time. I actually, when I was a kid, my stepdad, who I actually learned a lot from when I was young, he actually inspired me to kind of go deeper with the Bible, and my mom as well. And he would always watch Dr. Gene Scott, and I'd sit there and watch it with him, these lectures and stuff of Dr. Gene Scott doing theology. Is pretty funny, especially looking back. And but Pastor Chuck Smith, I really always enjoyed his verse by verse study. He helped make sense of things as well. Paul Copan, again, as I mentioned, he's very good on the Old Testament and the Old Testament law and understanding things within its context. So those would be, of course, it's not the gospel on that end, but those are some of my Christian teachers, I would say, that I really enjoyed. But Chuck Smith, he always did a great job at teaching, especially the verse by verse deal. So that he was really good. And I like a bunch of Christian apologetic guys. William Lane Craig's great. Frank Turek's pretty good. Trying to think of the other guys as well, real quick. Oh man, what's his name? From over in England. He deals with AI technology, and I cannot remember what his name is. I always liked him too. He's actually a pretty funny guy. And so I watched more lecture stuff over the years than I have anything else, but I always enjoyed watching their debates and learning and extracting stuff as well as some of their lecture stuff that they have. But yeah, I cannot remember what the guy's name is over in England, from England. I think he's a professor over in Oxford. He's actually a mathematician. And I haven't seen anything on him in a while, but he was always very good with his debates and Christian apologetics, looking at the evidence. And Norman Geisler was a good one as well. And of course, you have the evidence that demands a verdict. Most of those books are actually in the description. I highly recommend them. I tell everybody, if you're going to look at some, especially the evidence that demands a verdict, very great how they go through the evidence for the Gospels, the manuscripts. That's what I was talking with that guy about that was kind of debating me, and we're having a discussion, is the wealth of manuscripts that they have for the New Testament dating all the way back to the second century AD, and even some parchments that are found from the first century. It's quite amazing. No other ancient text in the world has that many supported copied manuscripts available, and that close to a date to the time of the purported originals. Even like the books of Homer and like the Iliad and Buddhism and things of that nature, they're purported originals, and the next copy manuscript is well after several hundred years, if not 1,000 or so years after the purported original. And their wealth of copy manuscripts are actually very few in number in comparison to the New Testament that has thousands upon thousands of manuscripts dating very close to the time of Christ himself. So, it was a big deal. And so there's just, yeah, Joe, I always like Chuck Smith. And okay, yeah, Charles Spurgeon. Yeah, I've never read any of his stuff, but I need to check them guys out as well. Thank you for that. It's been a little while since I've done so much studies with school and psychology and the science department that I haven't really done a whole lot on the theological in quite some time. That was from previous years. I'm going based off of. Okay, so so let's see. The black people and the real Jews were destroyed in the laws, so the false Jews could pursue. Okay. And actually, I'm not really sure. I don't know which a lot of Christians fall for because they don't know history. But that guy was claiming the Holocaust wasn't even real, and I was like, no, I'm not even getting in. He sent me over some documentaries of the deal, which I'll try to check out. But that's stretching it. There's I'm out kind of on that. That's it's a lot of people that have loved ones that lost their lives and stuff in the Holocaust, and I'm not really into making extravagant claims or believing in extravagant claims like that. That's for sure. There better be a wealth of data to back that up, and I haven't ever seen any. So if there is, it's very few. That's for sure. Okay. So Michelle says, we know the agenda is evil. Know this because they manipulate us into the society we are today. True. And a lot of that is actually, especially to the Industrial Revolution, we've seen a dramatic change in humanity, I would say, in the evolutionary pathway of humanity, even in the emergent civilization, but especially in the Industrial Revolution. The nuclear family structure began to kind of depart beginning in the Industrial Revolution era. And so we know they control this, and so therefore we can say they want us to believe in Christianity. That is why they push the Bible one way, is giving churches sake for money. And how much corruption comes from money in churches. They're very evil themselves. We also know they are controlling the weather because of climate change. The devil could then be controlled. Okay, hang on. There's okay. Let me try. There's someone else that just chimed in. Cursed Twins from Texas. Thank you for tuning in as well. Let me try to get to Michelle's deal. It's difficult to draw the line on how much they control. Yeah, points out point was the system kept Christianity alive so they could feel helpless to the agenda goal, killing off 80%. Other religions have similarities, like you discussed, the goal to keep people organized. So, in regards to using Christianity as a form of control on them, somehow, using Christianity. As I said before, the only way that I saw any evidence for that so far is found within its initiation into the Roman Empire, whenever it became dogmatized. to the greatest extent through the Roman Catholic Church and onward. The church wasn't necessarily designed to be that way. Christ, as I said before, went against the organizations of the Pharisees. And what do you prefer, natto or bricks? Neither, I would say, to be honest with you. So, I'm trying to think here because there's a bunch of different questions coming in here, but I'm going to do my best. Let me see here. So, okay. On what he was saying on the control of Christianity, I can see evidence of that, especially within, again, the dogmatization of Christianity through the Roman Empire, Roman Catholic Church. The Christian Church was never meant to necessarily be like that. The Christ himself went against the Pharisees, which were dogmatic themselves and very systematized, and which is also, and gosh, I had to go into that, but left hemisphere dominant trait, left hemisphere perspective, and that's not necessarily accurate. The left hemisphere takes things out of context, becomes literal, and so the Christianity, Christ said that no longer will you be worshiping in this temple or that temple. You'll be worshiping on mountaintops. And when 2 or 3 are gathered together, there I am among them. Christianity began in church homes, and they connected with one another and discussed things in depth about Christianity and helping each other and loving each other. That's what it was about. It wasn't about certain programs. And as I said before, fog machines and lights, and they're trying to attract people to the Christian church, but they're not even attracting the correct people. The people you want to attract, first off, are the lost, which they're not going to be attracted to those things at all. They're looking for answers. The atheists, for example, they're not going to be attracted because of fog machines. They're going to be attracted to what's the truth. They're going to be attracted to evidence, facts. What do you have to back up your claim that Christianity is even real to begin with? Why should I even believe in these ideas? And so that's where Christian apologetics is so essential for the Christian church. And there are some that are implementing that, thank God, but vast majority do not, and they have no desire to do so. Because one thing, they get uncomfortable themselves, especially when you start talking about evolution, and they're like, well, no, the Bible says this or Bible says that. And I'm like, wrong. Actually, most of what you're stating is interpretations, rooted in literalism. And it wasn't meant to be like that. There's various, the word itself is flexible and adaptable. And as far as I can tell, adapts to times and knowledge increase of humanity. And I think that's where, to a certain degree, that's why it's called the living word, I believe, more or less. But we're supposed to integrate knowledge that we gain, because we're not all knowing. Again, as I said before, not only should we transform our understanding of the word, should be transformed, and we should be able to see things in a different light, a different perspective, looking at the word, to be able to integrate what new knowledge comes in, to see how that fits in. And if the word is true, and then whatever new knowledge does come in, scientific discoveries and things of that nature, we should be able to integrate within, and that's what I say, the two go together. And, because God created all things. That's all funny thing. They're like, oh, well, science and religion, like there's this giant divide. It's like, no, they actually go together quite well. You just got to be able to understand how to implement those, integrate those together. And, God created all those things. He created the workings of science and everything. Everything in the universe was created by God. Therefore, they're the things of God, and those are the things we should meditate on, which means we need to meditate not only on the word, but on things that make us uncomfortable, those found within science. The issue, too, with the modern day church is that no one wants to get uncomfortable. But that's where growth is. Everybody recommends all these different books of Christianity. I've had people tell me hey, you got to read this, you got to read that. And I read very difficult books and very intellectual books. I'm not saying I'm intellectual or anything, but what I am saying is I read very difficult books on neuroscience and psychology and all the, physics and all sorts of different stuff. So when I pick up a book of, having more strength in God or whatever, it's It's too easy to read. I'm like, this doesn't challenge me. And then when you work out, when you're seeking out your fitness journey, if you're one of those, it's you can't keep doing the same easy stuff constantly. You won't see any growth. You have to have resistance. You have to do things that make you uncomfortable. And then what you do is you activate the muscles, and they stimulates them, and it causes them to rip and to grow, and you get bigger and stronger and healthier and all those good things. And the same thing applies with our growth within Christianity. Spiritually, psychologically, we should be engaging with hard to do things. You should be able to pick up a book, read a couple pages, and be slightly dumbfounded to have to put it down and think what it just said. You read a book by Carl Jung or somebody, you will do that. You read a couple pages, you've been lost. You have to set it down and really think through. But even a Bible technically should be viewed the same way. If you shouldn't just be reading through it. And maybe if you're beginning, yes, but as you go along, there should be in-depthness within that. You should be going in and saying, reading certain passages and go, what does that actually say? Then go through, look at the original language, pick out words, see what it may end up, because translations are lost a little bit sometimes. As I was just saying with the idea of the transfiguration, they're the same Greek word, but yet they're used different within our English words, because they didn't want to put transfiguration for Christian. See, that would be I would say, to a certain degree, a form of control if you were going to use that. It's like you can't transform to that high of a level. It's like, no, yeah, I believe you can. And there's humans to a certain degree that did do that. Elijah was one of those. Moses was one of those. The apostles, they did amazing miracles. We're not doing anything like that today. I hear about some of this stuff, but you don't really see it, especially within the vast majority of the churches today. And I've heard several, I'm talking prominent pastors, say that, the miracle working and stuff of the apostles was just for that time. And it's like, show me where it says that. And point it out. Please show me where it says that it was only for that time. It's not for later on. It's not for us today. If we don't see miracles, it's the same thing with dialoguing with God, with forming a personal relationship with God. The same thing. They're like, well, we don't need to do that. We have the word for that. It's like, show me where it says that. It doesn't say that. That's the dogmatization of Christianity. That's embedded within thoughts and works of church fathers and priests, and that's all good. They have plenty of good things to say, but not everything they say is gold. That's for sure. And so the thing, we have to think for ourselves. Again, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It comes down to the individual. Not only those that teach them, you extract information from those people and integrate it within your current knowledge structure, but then you also work it out yourself as well. You should be doing your own study, not just taking everything face value from everybody. And so it's very, very, okay. So, let's see. Mason, I have a question. Once you are saved, or you always saved? Can a Christian lose salvation? That's an interesting question too. I'm glad you asked that, Mason. That's actually a very good question. Once you're saved, are you always saved? Can a Christian lose salvation? Revelation does talk about God spitting people out of his mouth, denouncing their salvation, essentially. The best way to overcome that is to continuously keep working on your relationship with God. That's how you know you're saved at the end of the day. So working out your own salvation with fear and trembling, establishing that personal relationship with him. And the way to do that is, well, again, through meditation and fasting. Taking the time to still yourself, calling upon the name of the Lord, seeing what he speaks to our hearts and mind. And for those that say that's wrong, I want evidence for the contrary there. It's like, where does it say that that's wrong to still yourself? I haven't seen any of that at all. As I said, the Jewish meditation practice, which Christ would have practiced himself, was to still yourself and to be quiet and to wait on the Lord. That's what, he practiced. That's what the disciples more than likely practiced. And we've lost that in the modern day church. Again, as Michelle, as we were talking, with that of the dogmatization of Christianity, stemming back to the Roman Empire. We've lost what the true reference of the scripture tells us to do. was telling us to do, what Christ was telling us to do, what the apostles were telling us to transform and to really connect with the divine and to know God personally. My thing is, how do you know God personally if you're never actually dialoguing with him? Then it's just a monologue. You're just sending some notes to him, hoping maybe he'll respond through some event. And he does do that. That's a form of communication for sure. But true, authentic dialogue, I believe, is as he puts things within our hearts and minds, just as he spoke to the prophets of old, spoke to the disciples, the apostles, same thing applies to us today. And we just have to figure out how to tap into our potential and tap into the divine realm. And one of the ways of doing that, again, was what Christ was saying, fasting and meditation. And what's interesting too, people have been talking about the issues of psychedelic use. And there's been several reports of people tapping into the spiritual realm, so to speak. They're having these spiritual experiences, and it's having some wonderful benefits, and it probably is, I wouldn't doubt. But and even the book of Revelation, my gosh, so the island of Patmos had shrooms on it for one. We know that, and that's where John was exiled. And the whole book of Revelation looks like a shroom experience. That is for sure a documented shroom experience. But that's not to say he didn't tap into the realm. I think that is one means of connecting, but I don't think that's the most authentic, natural form of communicating. Otherwise, I believe Christ would have specified that as well as the apostle. And people can say, well, they probably extract that out of the text or something, but I don't see any evidence of that. We have manuscripts dating back almost to the time of the original, so I don't think that's the case at all. What I think is just like in the Garden of Eden. Now, I'm not saying psychedelics are terrible in and of themselves. That's not what I'm getting at. There's a lot of benefits, especially on the microdosing side. If you look at the literature here recently, helping people with depression, PTSD, all sorts of things. And what they're doing, what psychedelics are doing is rewiring the brain for a more positive experience. But meditation and fasting have been shown to do the same thing. And if you do it long enough, it actually has a hallucinatory element to it that emerges, similar to that of psychedelic use. And so I think what it is going back, as I was saying, the Garden of Eden idea is that what the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, good and evil represent, as far as I can tell, is that instant gratification, or you can go the long route, eat the tree of life, continue to live forever, and have a close personal relationship with God and learn in a gradual manner, because that's how we do learn. You cannot learn too quickly. Otherwise, people that do oftentimes learn experiences too quickly are the ones that end up forming PTSD. So there is this gradual, and even the story of Adam and Eve after they did eat the tree of knowledge, good and evil, is almost akin to that of PTSD. Reality just slaps them so hard they can't even stand it, and they're naked and afraid and everything else under the sun. And so it represents that of gradual implementation, integration of knowledge. And so, which is the longer route, which again, meditation and fasting are the longer route. But I would say the more sustainable route and the more calculated route as well, because psychedelics can have some bad experiences with them as well. But you have to be careful. And not everyone does well with that at all. And so it depends on body chemistry, neurochemistry, things of that nature. And so going the more disciplined, that's the word I'm looking for, the more disciplined route of meditating and fasting, depriving yourself from the senses to be in touch with the divine realm, is the more idealistic way of communicating with the divine, communicating with God, I would say. So, okay, I've said so many things. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going here. Yes, Alan, exactly. And Michelle, thank you for Michelle and Samantha. I'm trying to go through. I feel bad. So the Cursed Twins people, if you're still on, hopefully, I said neither on NATO. I didn't mean to be brief like that. I wasn't sure exactly what you're referencing there for the NATO or BRICS. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I don't really keep up with that part too much, to be honest. I know BRICS is the Chinese zone, but I mean, either way, it's all bad at the end of the day. So, because they at least control all of it. But, okay, let me see here. because we have a few different comments going on. I hope everyone's somewhat enjoying some of the information. And again, ask questions. I'm not trying to talk too much or deviate or anything of that sort, the best I can. So let's see. Joe said, reading the same kind of stuff. I share this journey inside the new information, engaging in controversy and challenging our comfort zone. Absolutely. Understand science meets to reveal miracles. Exactly. Absolutely. Pushing ourselves. And then the same thing Alan was saying, setting the bar higher. You're pushing yourself. You're getting yourself, sorry, I was reading some of the comments. You're pushing yourself and you're setting the bar higher, and you're engaging with new uncomfortable, and what it is too. So this is the fascinating work of Ian McGilchrist on the idea that he's a neuropsychologist, and what they found on the left and right hemisphere of our brains is the right hemisphere is more tailored towards that of the unfamiliar, the unknown, and it sees things at the whole of the context, and it deals with experiences, and it takes in experience. While the left hemisphere is more tailored towards the familiar, and it takes things out of context, and it's about precision, and it's systematic. It's not logical, it's systematic. It's very interesting. And so while the right hemisphere it's more adaptable, and that's where most of the new information comes into our right hemisphere, goes to the left, and should ultimately end up going back to the right so you analyze, you see how it integrates into the left hemisphere, and then you take that information and go back to the right, and you're thinking. That's where the critical thought process. So not only are you taking in the information, then you're critically thinking on the information you just acquired. Then what you're trying to do is see how that information fits within the framework of your left hemisphere, because that's where the knowledge structure framework is housed within the left hemisphere. And so what happens too is people want to stay in the familiar, and we become, especially in our modern day society, we become more attuned to that. We want to stay within the familiar. That's why most people do not want to learn new things. They want to watch the same shows over and over. And I'm guilty as well. They want to just go have fun and do things. They do their work, and they want to go have fun and do what's familiar all the time. Understandable, but we should be taking time to engage with the unfamiliar in order to activate that right hemisphere and see how true our framework that we have made up within our left hemisphere is. And what's interesting is when Christ, so I'm going back to what I was talking about earlier, that with the ideas of becoming childlike. If you're humble yourself as a child, paraphrasing there, what he's meaning by that, as far as I can tell, especially with the data that we have on the right and left hemisphere, is that children, their right hemispheres are much more activated than adults. And so as you become an adult, your left hemisphere becomes more solidified over time, and the right becomes more dampened. And so and what's even more fascinating, like schizophrenics, for instance, they actually have damage to the right hemisphere, so they're left hemisphere dominant. And so that tells you anything, how they operate. And man, there's so many things that go in with that. I just really don't have enough time. I got some other things I got to attend to here before too long. But as far as I can tell, that's what he's meaning, because when you activate the right hemisphere, you're able to experience and engage. And also what's interesting too is that's where most of the emotions are housed. And that's also where empathy is housed, within the right hemisphere, and connection is housed. That's where vast majority. So you're able to connect with the material you're engaging with, or the experience, or people, or whatever it may be. But new information, you're able to engage with the right hemisphere and then think about how that can be integrated in your current knowledge structure. And oftentimes what happens is these within the Christian churches, we become so systematized, so systematic, that we want to stay in the familiar, and you begin to bring things outside, even as much evidence you may have to verify what you're saying is a good fit, I would say, like that of evolution in chapter 1 of Genesis. People are reluctant to accept it because they viewing things through the left hemisphere, and they're never engaging with the right anymore, because they're constantly engaging with the familiar. So they have no means of activating the right hemisphere. And in modern day society, what Ian McGilchrist was pointing out is the fact that that's a curse of our modernization, modern society, is that we're actually becoming more reliant on the left hemisphere than we are the right now. And of course, they're both essential for sure, but we're becoming so reliant on the left hemisphere that we're imposing frameworks on the world and how the world should work. The radical leftists are perfect with it. Even on the radical right in the political sphere, they do the same thing. They're just different perspectives. Is all they are. They're different models. That's what it is. The framework, the model of the world that they have, and then they impose that. And anytime you have any evidence to contradict that, and they have nothing to back up their claims, they resort to profanity and yelling and everything else that goes along with that. And okay. So Mason says, does God hear the prayers of them unbelievers? Yes, God does hear the prayers of unbelievers. I do believe. I mean, if you're praying to God, I mean, he's going to hear you, of course. The deal is to, if you're seeking out God, he can be found. That's pretty much. The fearfully and wonderfully so. Exactly. Let's be careful. Exactly. Our minds are fearfully and wonderfully made. So, yes, let's be careful with it. And let's treat it as something special, because that's what it is. I mean, the conscious abilities that we have been given are incredible. Even our modern day supercomputers cannot keep up with the brain process, or the processes of our brain. I said it before on one of the shows that one of the latest studies from Dublin, I think it's Dublin University, they, as far as they can tell, it appears that our brains are used in quantum processing to generate consciousness. And that's how our brains operate. Well, that's still well above our means of technology today. We're currently have prototypes of quantum computers using quantum processing, but we haven't made it that far. Sorry, I don't mean to wiggle it around, but so we need the potential, and it's not only our minds, but we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We need to be seeking to utilize the potential that we have within us, to not hide our talents within the sand, but utilize everything that we have and ask God how we can utilize those. And one of the ways of doing that, activating dormant genes within our cells, producing new proteins, by putting ourselves in unfamiliar situations, engaging with unfamiliar, hard to do material, and engaging with that. And there's also obviously, when you engage with new material, it's always good to do it somewhat systematically. You don't want to just randomly fire, because then you may randomly fire in the wrong direction. There's actually several, there's a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, a prominent worship pastor quit worshiping because he read the God Delusion book of Richard Dawkins. And yet I could recommend him some good books that would completely blow Richard Dawkins' work out of the water. And most of Richard Dawkins' work is, interesting. But not to say he doesn't have some good information, that's for sure. But he takes things out of its context, for one. But anyways, okay, let's go through here. Here's all praise responding in another story. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, responding is another story, But I believe he responds to unbelievers to a certain degree. But you have to really seek to engage with him if you're truly authentic about it. And he's willing to guide us to him. And so let's approach him humbly. Yeah, exactly, Joe. In an authentic manner, seeking out God. God can tell what's in our hearts and minds, as far as that goes. And so, okay. Let me see. That's because we are all dominant with left and right. No, actually, surprisingly enough, that's not. It's true to a certain degree, and that's something I haven't really gotten into as much. Now I'll get into that at a different time as far as the dominance, because generally speaking, we use kind of both. You always use your left and right, but the vast majority of the population now appears to be utilizing more the left than the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is, like I said, is great for grafting in new information and new experiences and things of that nature. When you experience the same thing over and over, you're just activating the left over and over is all you're doing, because it's the same familiar processes. And so when you do things different, even as simple as eating with your non-dominant hand, whatever hand your dominant hand is, but your non-dominant hand, or brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, begins to activate your right hemisphere and rewire your brain. As simple as that. But meditation and fasting do the same thing as well. And Noah, someone. Oh yeah, Mason, you're always going. You're always gonna have people. I've had all kinds of people saying crazy things, and I've had some good challenges over the years by people saying things. But the great thing I love, and I tell people, I even told the guy that Michelle recommended me talking to. I enjoy engaging conversation, because I mean, they may know something I don't know. They'll bring up things that I haven't thought about before. They will sit there and present verses or something that maybe I have learned, but I just haven't engaged with in a long time. And what happens is I end up engaging with that material in a different way that actually ultimately enhances my belief. It actually solidifies it even more. And so I enjoy engaging with people on in-depth conversation. I actually do poorly to a certain degree with small talk. I mean, I can do it. I just don't prefer it. I don't know really what to talk about. Talk to people how the Cubs doing. I don't know. So it's like I'd rather just I like getting more intimate with people and having in-depth conversations and being authentic rather than just vaguely talking about nothing. And so I can do that in the bathroom if I want. I don't need to sit there and talk to somebody. I'd rather get to know somebody truly and engage in good conversations to help each other learn. That's what we're supposed to be doing, again, in the Christian church. We're supposed to be engaging with each other and not talking about the Cubs and everything else under the way. That's okay to talk about that, but man, we need to be engaging with things and getting in depth and really pushing ourselves. And of course, as well as helping each other and praying for each other, that is as well. But we're supposed to be engaging, dialoguing, getting in depth to help us know each other better, to know ourselves better, and to know God better at the end of the day. I think it's okay. No, absolutely. You're exactly right. Whether it's Michelle or Samantha, I'm not sure which one, but you're exactly right. It is case by case. Everything is case by case to a certain extent. There's always different variables at play with each individual, because each individual is different. I mean, that goes with everything. You look at medical diagnosis, you look at psychological diagnosis, you look at anything. Everything has a certain different variables at play that you have to work with, and that's for sure. And you have to. That's why, as well, going back to the deal of working out your own salvation, fear and trembling. It's up to the individual, and each individual is uniquely different, and so you have to figure out what it is for that, tailored to the individual. I mean, that goes with everything if you really think about it. And so it's pretty remarkable. Okay, so I don't have any relationship, even there's can be on the path behind God. Sometimes those who are angry. Yep, absolutely. Hey, Greg, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Coming on. I'm probably going to go for another 10 or so minutes. And I know Ashley and Michelle and Samantha were wanting to ask more questions. Anybody has any other questions at this point? I can definitely think of a few things, but I'd rather have people ask some questions that would love to. I hope everybody's enjoying this, by the way. And this is actually pretty fun. It's definitely keeping me on my toes. It's been an interesting past few days. My son's been sick. I've kind of got a little stuffed up nose deal, and been going through a few fun things. But other than that, it's Like it says, I know this is what you. Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. Anytime, Mason. That's for sure. We definitely need to get together here sometime soon. I'm not sure if you have a bike. I haven't ridden in about over 6 months. So, of course, it's been too hot here lately to get me out there. Maybe when I was younger in a racing mode, but not anymore. But I would like to get out there and ride a little bit sometime or another. So get Bob and everybody together. Um, yeah, no, definitely more for next time. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys had some. So yeah, anybody has any other questions? Kind of as we're getting towards the end here, I really appreciate all you guys coming on and supporting, and liking, and sharing, and all that kind of good stuff. And if you want, you can support financially, donating through PayPal or Venmo in the link. And again, there's some different books in there to check out that are very informative that I highly recommend everyone, especially those beginning their journey to really delving deep into the Word, of knowing what the evidence there is to back it up, and to know that what you believe is true, and it's not just some fictional story written up by a bunch of crazy cave people or something of that sort. So, yeah, he ended up somehow acquiring my old KTM 450. Yes, exactly. I know, it's very interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely get together here soon. And do you believe Peter and Judas? Peter definitely. I would imagine he went to heaven. I mean, he was you know, Judas. I have no earthly idea. I don't. That's a good question, Alan. I'd say that's a question for God more than anything else. I'm not even sure. Peter was a big influence on the church, though, and he, was died for his faith, being crucified upside down. So he's I know he's definitely up there, but Judas, that's a very interesting deal. No, yeah, no, more than welcome there, Mason. I appreciate you guys even giving me the time of day to engage like this. That's for sure. Trying to think of something else right quick. What else? Well, one funny thing the guy was talking about, I was referencing archaeological evidence of the Bible, both Old and New Testament. And he said, well, what the Jews just hid that there, and placed that there themselves. And I was like, that would be very difficult to place something deep underground where they're finding these artifacts, and somehow at the same time fool the scientific community, experts in those field, digging around these things. I'd see no evidence for that. So, and if we're going to play that game, you're pretty much denying scientific reality. And if we're going to go that far, you might as well just deny reality itself. So, it doesn't make much sense. So no biscuits in. Well, what does that mean, Joe? As far as no biscuits, what is that in reference to? That's kind of funny. They were part of the perfect plan. Yeah, absolutely. But Peter was definitely he was a devout follower. He made a mistake for sure by denying Christ, but following that, he did not did a very good job by influencing. And as far as the biscuits go, I mean, I can mail you some maybe. It'd be stale by the time they get to you overseas, though. Yeah. I can mail you some over. Probably be a little stale by the time we get overseas, but they might still be all right. You can probably heat them up, fluff them a little bit. You'll be all right on that end. So, oh man, and there's plenty of other things that he brought up that were interesting. Scones and tea time, yes sir. I'm all for some good tea. And all right, well, I mean, if no one has any other questions at this point, we're right around an hour and a half. I figure we'll, and I'm trying to figure out okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Much love to you guys as well. Tell everybody I said hello, and we'll definitely get together here soon. And so, Yeah, no, I will. I'll definitely reach out to you for the next one. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Um, I'm actually, since everyone's still kind of on, um, oh yeah, we were supposed to talk a little bit about that as well. As far as the peace and security, I think so. Actually, to be honest with you, it's fascinating you sent that over. I did a little bit more research on that. And it's a very fascinating, and I thought that years ago to begin with, whenever they're forming all this great reset and stuff. Um, as far as their peace and safety, peace and security, essentially the same thing that Paul was talking about, and then sudden destruction, which is in reference to the return of Christ destroying the wicked. Um, I think that's exactly what they're doing. That everything that they promote is like this Disney World type society that's going to emerge and a utopian, and that it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what they're doing, and yeah, peace, safety, and sudden destruction. Speaking of the coming of Christ, second coming, and the rapture of His people, I know a lot of people do believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, and they reference this, but the destruction that's mentioned there is not the destruction of the tribulation. The tribulation, I like to tell people, the tribulation itself, 3.5 years, is actually going to be wonderful for those that are actually a part of that system, for the most part, until you're labeled a traitor because you're just not adherent enough to the beast, and then you'll just be killed or exiled into the gulags. But the the second coming and rapture are the same thing. And if there was any type of deception within the Christian church that I like to explain to people, is that of the pre-tribulation rapture that's promoted beginning with oh gosh, what's his name? John Nelson Darby in the 19th century. Now, I could be wrong. There could be a pre-tribulation. God, I hope so. I hope there is a pre-tribulation rapture. We don't have to experience any of the tribulation, persecution. But as far as I can tell throughout the text, there's no mention of that whatsoever. Everything that, even from Christ and the apostles and even the Old Testament text in the book of Daniel, reference to the gathering of the people following the tribulation era. So that'll be a great deception. And whenever the mark of the beast comes, which it won't be labeled the mark of the beast, first off, it'll be seen as something that's good and logical to, get injected into your hand, as they're already beginning to do, and have your digital identification and integrate yourself into this new polite society and smart cities. Most Christians not educated enough and that are possessed by the pre-tribulation theory will essentially go, okay, yeah, well, I mean, Christ hasn't returned, so this cannot be the mark of the beast. Surely this isn't tribulation time. But unfortunately, I would rather believe that there's a post-tribulation rapture and then there be a pre-tribulation rapture and be rescued up than than vice versa. So, yeah, we'll definitely talk here soon. So there's a couple of things. I know there's a few on here that I want to talk about. One is I would like to do this more often, do a Q&A, maybe either once a month or once every couple of weeks. And then I'm also looking at next month beginning I think it's going to be a 10-part study series that I'm going to do on what is Christianity. I'm probably going to name it something a little different than that, but I'm going to delve into the evidence for the Old Testament, essentially sort of what I've done for the my Christian apologetics study, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth and tap into a few other things as well, so people can learn a little bit more about what they believe and what it is, and why what they believe makes more sense than anything else that's out there, and that the evidence amounts to that as well, and so they can be kind of rest assured in their faith. So that's what I'm looking at doing this next month. So if you want to be a part of that, I'll keep everyone updated on social media and on YouTube as best I can. I'm trying to figure out a date. I think, as far as I can tell, Sunday afternoons appear to work well for me as well as everyone involved. There seems to be a lot more interaction on Sunday afternoon, so I think that's what I'm going to start doing instead during the week. We've got plenty to do during the week with the 3 kids and everything else going on in life, and everybody else does as well. So I'm thinking Sunday afternoons is when I'm going to do it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it bi-weekly or every week or something of that nature for that study series, but that's what I'm going to do. And it'll be a little longer. I'm thinking somewhere around an hour and a half to 2 hours, kind of like the past couple of videos I've done, to really delve into. And we're going to begin with the power of ideas, looking into belief systems, and understanding why people believe what they believe, and what beliefs can enable us to do. And so that's what I'm looking at. And if you guys are interested, just keep watch over social media or reach out on the messenger, and we'll kind of go from there. And I figure maybe here in 2 or 3 weeks, I'll definitely have something together, have a PowerPoint laid out and everything, and we'll kind of go through it. And each week will be, kind of follow itself. So, all right. So thank you all. I really appreciate it again. Please like and share, and you can donate and check out the books and everything. I really appreciate you guys. Much love to everyone. Reach out if you need anything, you have any questions, or you need prayer requests. I'm here for you, that's for sure. And much love to everybody. Keep safe out there and keep cool. That's for sure.